So this is Jeff Hamrick at Rhodes College, and I'm going to talk now about defining a measure on each sample that's been taken without replacement from a set of data that is dichotomous by dichotomous in nature. So recall that this data is redacted from a study conducted by a French psychologist. A woman goes into a bar. She either smiles and glances at or just glances at a man sitting at the bar, and then we record whether or not within a certain period of time the man ignores the woman or approaches her. The philosophy behind what we're doing right now is that we are thinking that it's somewhat strange if smiling has no impact, that there should be only two cases down here in which a woman only glances at a man and he ends up ultimately approaching her. We think that that's strange if smiling versus not smiling has no impact. And so we're going to create an artificial universe, essentially, in which smiling or not smiling doesn't matter at all, by simply collecting subsets repeatedly from the original set of data. We did that in the last video tutorial by sampling without replacement, but now we want to extract an essential feature from those samples that we're taking. Namely, we want to look at this attribute, approached or not, and count how many times in our artificially generated sample the woman approached the man. So we're collecting from all 20 of the original trials in this experiment. We're ignoring whether or not the woman actually smiled at the guy or did not smile at the guy. And from just independent draws of 10 at a time from this data set, we're counting the number of approaches. That's going to be somehow indicative of what happens in a universe where a woman smiling at a man at a bar doesn't really matter at all. So how do we go on ahead and ask Fathom to compute for us the number of approaches associated with a particular sample without replacement? So to do that, I'm going to double click on the sample bar. This inspection box will pop up somewhere on your desktop. I'm just going to drag mine over the Fathom workspace now. Recall that if I click this button here, on the default tab, the sample tab, I can generate additional samples without replacement because this is no longer checked right here. And I click on this measures tab now to define a measure. I'm going to call my measure the count of approaches, okay? And not surprisingly, the formula for that in Fathom is going to be pretty naturally defined. It's going to be defined in the following way. It's going to be count. Okay, notice two things. Fathom has turned this count function blue to indicate that it understands what it is, that it likes it. When I've typed in this left parentheses, it automatically creates the right parentheses for me. That's something you'll probably need to get used to in Fathom. I'm going to type the name of the variable of interest. It's the variable approached or not. Notice that because that just turned purple, Fathom understands what it is and is acknowledging it. If it doesn't turn purple, you've probably made a typo. I'm going to type equals then, and then quotes, because I've entered my variables as strings. They're not quantitative variables. They're dichotomous variables with word labels associated with them. The appropriate word here is approached. So I'm going to count the number of instances in which the approached or not attribute is actually equal to approached. Okay, so I press OK, and notice that in the current sample without replacement that's up, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instances in which the attribute approached or not is equal to approached. Okay, notice that if I toggle back over to the sample tab, and I sample more cases and then go back over to the measures tab, that count, that measure has now been updated. So that's part of this dynamic functionality of Fathom that we're going to find to be very, very useful this semester.